Come, nestle down, and let the world outside grow quiet. Let the sounds of the day fade into a soft hum, a distant memory. For tonight, we travel back, not just a few years, or even a few hundred, but back through the mists of time itself, to the very dawn of storytelling, to a land of sun-baked brick and whispering reeds, where the rivers Tigris and Euphrates drew silver lines across the earth. We travel to the great city of Uruk, and we will speak of its king. His name was Gilgamesh. Listen to the sound of it. Gilgamesh. A name like the striking of a great bronze shield. He was a king of legends, a man so mighty that the stories of his deeds were etched into clay tablets while the pyramids were but a dream in a pharaoh's mind. The city he ruled, Uruk of the high walls and the sacred temples, was a marvel. Its walls were built of kiln-fired brick, so vast and strong that a chariot could race upon their summit. They shone like a copper band under the Mesopotamian sun, a testament to the strength and will of the king who had commanded their creation. Within these walls, life teemed and bustled. There were markets fragrant with spices from faraway lands, cinnamon and myrrh, and the sweet scent of dates piled high. There were scribes in the temple courtyards, their reed styluses clicking softly against wet clay, recording the harvests of barley and the movements of the stars. Potters turned their wheels, weavers sent their shuttles flying, and children's laughter echoed in the narrow, shaded streets. Uruk was a monument to civilization, a jewel in the cradle of the world. And at its heart, in his palace of cedar and stone, lived Gilgamesh. He was not like other men. The gods themselves had a hand in his making. The great mother goddess Aruru had shaped his form, giving him a body of perfect strength and beauty. The sun god, Shamash, had blessed him with a face that was radiant and commanding. He was taller than any man in his city, broader of shoulder, stronger of arm. When he walked through the streets of Uruk, the people would stop and stare in awe, for the gods had made him 2/3 divine and only 1/3 human. But it is often the smallest part of us that gives us the most trouble. That 1/3 part, the human part, was a seed of restlessness in his heart. His divine 2/3 gave him boundless energy, a strength that never seemed to wane, a spirit that could not be contented with the simple rhythms of ruling. He was a wild bull, magnificent and untamed, pacing within the very walls he had built. He would rise before the sun, his mind already racing, and he would not rest until long after the moon was high and silver in the sky. He challenged the young men of Uruk to contests of strength they could never hope to win, leaving them exhausted and bruised in the dust of the city square. He scaled the highest temple towers just to see the world spread out below him, his spirit yearning for something more, something beyond the horizon. His appetites were as vast as his strength. He claimed the finest harvests for his storehouses, the most skilled craftsmen for his projects, the most beautiful music for his halls. The people of Uruk were proud of their mighty king, of his beautiful city, but they were also weary. His energy was a storm that never ceased, and they were tired of living in its constant wind. In their quiet moments, in the privacy of their homes, the old men and women of Uruk would sigh. "He is magnificent," they would whisper, "but he has no equal. He has no friend to temper his spirit. There is no one to walk beside him, to meet his gaze, to share the burden of his great, restless heart." And so they began to pray. They lifted their voices not in anger, but in quiet supplication to the great gods who dwelt in the heavens. They prayed to Anu, the father of the gods, whose home was the starry sky itself. "O great Anu," they murmured, "you have given us a king like a wild bull. His bellowing fills the city and no one can stand against him. Create a companion for him, a second self, one who is his equal in strength and spirit. Let them contend with each other, and let Uruk have peace." The gods, in their celestial courts, heard the quiet prayers of the people of Uruk. Their voices rose like the smoke from 1,000 hearths and reached the ears of the divine. Anu, the Sky Father, heard and considered. He turned to Aruru, the mother goddess, she who had first fashioned Gilgamesh from the clay of the earth. "Aruru," he commanded, his voice like the distant rumble of thunder, "you created this wild bull of a man. Now create his second self. Fashion a man in his image, with a heart as stormy and a strength as profound. Let him be a match for Gilgamesh. Let them meet, and let the king's wild heart find its mirror." And so Aruru, the goddess of creation, descended from the heavens. She went out into the great silence of the steppe, the vast, empty plains that stretched beyond the fertile lands of the rivers. She knelt. She washed her hands in a clear, cool spring. Then she pinched off a piece of clay, the same sacred earth from which all life had sprung. She worked it in her divine hands, thinking of Gilgamesh, of his power, his passion, his loneliness. She molded the clay, and into it she breathed the spirit of the wild. She breathed the silence of the stars, the fury of the storm, the endurance of the rock. And there, on the quiet earth, a new being took shape. He was not born of woman. He was born of the wild clay. His name was Enkidu. Enkidu, a name like the whisper of wind through tall grasses. Where Gilgamesh was a product of the city, all polished stone and divine heritage, Enkidu was a child of nature itself. His body was covered in matted hair, like the coat of a wild animal. His locks were long and unshorn, like the waving fields of barley. He knew nothing of cities, of walls, of kings. His home was the open steppe, his roof was the sky. He lived among the animals, and they accepted him as one of their own. He ran with the gazelles, his powerful legs eating up the miles, his heart thumping in time with theirs. He drank with them from the waterholes, kneeling down to lap the cool water, his wild hair mingling with their soft muzzles. He ate what they ate, tearing at the grasses and herbs with his strong teeth. He understood their language, the flick of an ear, the stamp of a hoof, the warning cry of a bird. At night he slept curled up among them, feeling the warmth of their bodies, a part of the great, breathing silence of the wilderness. He was the guardian of this wild kingdom. He knew the ways of the trappers and hunters who came from the cities. When he found their pits dug to catch his friends the gazelles, he would fill them in with earth. When he found their snares set for the birds, he would tear them apart with his powerful hands. He was a wild, innocent, and powerful force, the untamed heart of the world. One day a young trapper who made his living by catching game for the markets of Uruk came upon Enkidu at a waterhole. The trapper froze, his heart pounding in his chest. He had never seen such a creature. It was shaped like a man, but it was as wild as any beast. He watched, hidden behind a rock, as this hairy man drank alongside the wolves and the deer, as if he were their brother. For 3 days the trapper tried to work, and for 3 days his work was undone. Every trap he set, Enkidu dismantled. Every pit he dug, Enkidu filled. The wild man's face was not filled with malice, but with a simple, powerful certainty. This was his home, and these were his people. The trapper returned to his father, his face pale with fear and frustration. "Father," he said, his voice trembling, "there is a man in the hills, the wildest man I have ever seen. He is stronger than any I know. He ranges over the land like a spirit. He pulls up my traps and fills my pits. He will not let me hunt. He protects the animals. I am afraid of him." The trapper's father, a wise old man, listened patiently. He stroked his beard and thought for a moment. "My son," he said, "this is a matter for the king. Go to Uruk. Go to the palace of Gilgamesh. Tell him of this wild man. The king's strength is immense. He will know what to do. But perhaps this is not a matter for strength, but for wisdom." And so the trapper journeyed to the great city of Uruk. He passed through the mighty gates and was humbled by the scale of the walls. He made his way to the palace, and, after much waiting, was granted an audience with the king. He stood before Gilgamesh, who seemed to fill the entire throne room with his presence. The trapper, trembling, told his story. He spoke of the hairy man who ran with the gazelles, who drank with the wild beasts, and who protected them from all harm. Gilgamesh listened, and a strange light came into his eyes, a flicker of interest, of recognition. A wild man, as strong as a force of nature? A being who lived outside the walls, beyond all rules? For the first time, the king heard of a power that seemed to echo his own. But Gilgamesh was wise in his own way. He did not call for his soldiers or his hunters. He understood that to meet wildness with force would only lead to a fruitless clash. Wildness had to be coaxed, to be shown something it did not know it was missing. "Go back to your lands," Gilgamesh said to the trapper, his voice calm and deep. "And take with you Shamhat, one of the temple priestesses. She is wise in the ways of the heart. Let her go to the waterhole where the wild man drinks. She need not fight him. Let her simply show him what it is to be human. Let her teach him a different kind of life, a different kind of companionship. When he has known this, his wild companions will no longer seem like his family. His heart will change, and he will seek a new home." So the trapper did as the king commanded. He went to the great temple of Ishtar and found Shamhat. She was a woman of grace and deep understanding, whose role was to serve the goddess and to initiate people into the mysteries of civilization and human connection. She listened to the trapper's story and agreed to go with him. They traveled for 3 days, back to the edge of the wilderness. When they reached the waterhole, Shamhat told the trapper to hide himself. She, however, sat quietly by the edge of the water, her fine city clothes a stark contrast to the wild landscape. She simply waited. On the 3rd day, a sound came from the hills. A herd of gazelles, flowing like a river of sand and muscle, came down to drink. And running among them, his matted hair flying, his body powerful and lithe, was Enkidu. He came to the water's edge and knelt to drink. As he did, he saw her. He had never seen a human being up close, so still and calm. He had never seen woven cloth or hair that was combed and scented with oil. He looked at Shamhat, and she looked back at him, her eyes filled not with fear but with a gentle curiosity. She did not run. She did not scream. She began to speak to him, her voice soft and melodic. He did not understand the words, but he understood the tone. It was not the warning cry of a bird or the growl of a predator. It was something new. For 6 days and 7 nights, Shamhat stayed with Enkidu by the waterhole. She shared her food with him, bread and dates from the city. At first, he did not know what to do with the bread. He sniffed it, puzzled. She showed him how to eat it, and when he tasted it, a look of wonder crossed his face. He had only ever known the taste of grass and roots. This was the taste of skill, of patience, of civilization. She gave him ale to drink from a skin. He sputtered and coughed, used only to water, but then he drank more, and a warmth spread through him, a feeling of ease and relaxation he had never known. She taught him about clothing, draping one of her own fine cloaks over his shoulders. He felt its softness against his skin, so different from the rough bark of trees or the cold wind. She spoke to him of Uruk, of the great king Gilgamesh, of music and poetry and the company of other people. And slowly, gently, she initiated him into the world of humanity. At the end of the 7 days, Enkidu felt a change within him. His mind, once filled only with the immediate concerns of the wild, thirst, hunger, danger, was now filled with new thoughts, new feelings. He looked at his own hands and saw them not just as tools for tearing roots, but as things that could build or hold another's hand. He turned to go back to his family, the gazelles. He started to run with them, but something was different. His legs felt heavy. The gazelles, which had once run beside him, now shied away. They caught a new scent on him, the scent of bread, of perfumed oil, of humanity. They no longer saw him as one of them. They fled from him, their white tails flashing, and disappeared into the hills. Enkidu tried to follow, but his strength failed him. He stood alone on the plain, watching them go. A profound sadness filled him. He had lost his home. He had lost his family. He turned and saw Shamhat, watching him with compassionate eyes. He walked back to her, and this time he sat at her feet, and he listened. "Your world has changed, Enkidu," she said softly. "You are no longer a beast of the field. You have become wise. You have become like a god. Why would you want to roam the plains with animals? Come with me. Come to Uruk of the high walls. I will take you to the palace of Gilgamesh the king. He is a man of perfect strength, just like you. He is the one you are meant to meet. His heart is as restless as yours was, and perhaps you are the one who can bring him peace." The name Gilgamesh sparked something in Enkidu's mind. A purpose, a destination. The loneliness of losing his wild family was replaced by the anticipation of meeting this other, this king, who was said to be his equal. "Yes," Enkidu said, and his own voice sounded strange to him, for he was now speaking in words, not animal calls. "Take me to Uruk. Take me to this Gilgamesh. I wish to see him. I will challenge him. I will shout in the streets of Uruk, and I will say, 'I am the strongest. I am the one who has come from the wild to change the old ways. Take him.'" Shamhat smiled gently. "His heart is proud, Enkidu. A loud challenge may not be the wisest path, but come, let us go to Uruk. Your destiny awaits you there." The journey to Uruk was an education for Enkidu. They stopped first at a shepherd's camp. The shepherds gathered around, amazed at this wild man. They put out bread for him, but he just stared at it. Shamhat had to show him again. "Enkidu, this is what people eat." He ate the bread. They offered him ale. He drank 7 goblets, and his heart grew light. He felt cheerful and began to sing. He washed his hairy body, anointed himself with oil, and put on the clothes of a man. His wildness was still there, in the power of his shoulders and the fire in his eyes, but he now looked human. He took up a weapon and stood guard for the shepherds at night, chasing away the wolves and lions that had once been his companions. He had become a protector of humanity. As they drew closer to the great city, they met a traveler on the road, hurrying from Uruk with a downcast face. "What is happening in the city that makes you look so grim?" Shamhat asked. The man sighed. "It is the king, Gilgamesh. He is all-powerful, and his appetites are endless. By decree, he claims the right to be with every new bride on her wedding night, before her own husband. The drum is being beaten now for another wedding, and another young woman will be taken to the king's palace." The people groan under his arrogance. When Enkidu heard this, a righteous fury filled his heart. This was not the way of the wild. This was not the way of a true leader. This Gilgamesh, this king he had heard so much about, was not a protector, but a tyrant. The challenge he had boasted of now had a true purpose. "I will go to Uruk," Enkidu declared, his voice rumbling like a distant storm. "I will stop him. I will stand in the doorway of the wedding house, and I will not let him pass. I will show him a strength that comes not from divine right, but from the heart of the earth itself." And so Enkidu, the wild man made tame, the child of the steppe, strode towards the mighty walls of Uruk, his heart set on a collision with its king. When Enkidu arrived in Uruk, the people of the city flocked to see him. They had never seen a man like him. He was shorter than Gilgamesh, but his body was terrifically dense with muscle, his bones broad and strong. His wild hair, though cleaned and oiled, still framed a face that held the wisdom of the wilderness. The people marveled at him. "He looks like Gilgamesh," they whispered to one another, "but shorter and more solid, as if he is rooted in the earth. Surely this is the one the gods have sent. He is a worthy opponent for our king." Enkidu stood in the main street, and the energy of the city washed over him. The smells of cooking fires, the shouts of merchants, the rumble of thousands of lives being lived together. It was overwhelming, and yet he felt a sense of purpose that he had never known on the silent steppe. That evening, the city prepared for a wedding celebration. The sounds of music and feasting filled the air, but beneath it was an undercurrent of sorrow. A ceremonial bed was prepared and carried through the streets towards the wedding house. Soon, the king would come to claim his right. As the procession neared the house, a figure stepped out of the shadows and blocked the doorway. It was Enkidu. He planted his feet wide, his arms crossed over his massive chest. He was as immovable as a mountain. Words spread through the city like fire. "A wild man is blocking the way. He is challenging the king." Soon Gilgamesh himself arrived, his fine robes shimmering in the torchlight, his head held high with the casual arrogance of a god. He saw the figure blocking his path, and his eyes narrowed. He was not used to being denied anything. He moved forward, expecting the man to step aside. Enkidu did not move. He simply stood, his presence a silent, powerful rebuke. Gilgamesh's face darkened with rage. "Out of my way," he commanded, his voice accustomed to instant obedience. Enkidu did not answer in words. He simply held his ground. With a roar, Gilgamesh lunged, and the two titans met. They grappled in the street, under the light of the torches and the silent gaze of the moon. It was a battle the likes of which Uruk had never seen. They were like two great bulls, locked horn to horn. They strained and pushed, their muscles bulging. The very stones of the street seemed to groan under the force of their struggle. They crashed against the walls of the houses, shaking the doorposts. The people of Uruk watched in terrified silence, their hearts pounding. For what seemed like an eternity, they were perfectly matched. Every move Gilgamesh made, Enkidu countered. Every surge of power from the king was met by the unyielding, earthy strength of the wild man. Gilgamesh, for the first time in his life, was fighting someone who was his equal. He felt a thrill of fear, of excitement, of pure, unadulterated joy. He was not alone in his strength anymore. Finally, with a tremendous effort that drew on all his divine power, Gilgamesh managed to gain the upper hand. He forced Enkidu to one knee. The crowd gasped. The king had won. But then, something remarkable happened. As Gilgamesh stood panting over his defeated opponent, his fury suddenly vanished. It drained away like water into sand, and in its place, a strange new feeling arose. He looked down at Enkidu, who was looking back up at him, not with hatred, but with a look of grudging respect. In that moment, Gilgamesh saw himself. He saw his own strength, his own wildness, his own loneliness reflected in the eyes of this man from the steppe. And his heart, which had been so restless and angry, suddenly grew calm. He reached down and offered his hand to Enkidu. Enkidu took it, and the king pulled him to his feet. They stood, facing each other, two halves of a single whole, the king of the city and the king of the wild. And then, in the middle of the street, surrounded by the stunned people of Uruk, they embraced. They hugged each other like long-lost brothers. Gilgamesh's mother, the goddess Ninsun, who was wise and could interpret dreams, had seen this moment coming. She had told her son that a star would fall from the sky, a companion so mighty he could not be moved, and that Gilgamesh would love him as a wife. And now, it had come to pass. The friendship that was born that night changed everything. Gilgamesh for the first time had a friend. Enkidu for the first time had a home. They were inseparable. They walked together on the great walls of Uruk, Gilgamesh pointing out the storehouses, the temples, the orchards he had built, and Enkidu telling him of the movements of the stars and the ways of the animals. Enkidu's wildness was tempered by the order and culture of the city, and Gilgamesh's arrogance was softened by Enkidu's simple, honest heart. The king's boundless energy was no longer spent on oppressing his people, but on adventures and laughter with his new friend. Uruk, at last, had peace. But the restless heart of Gilgamesh was not stilled for long. It was merely channeled. One day, as he and Enkidu sat in the palace, a familiar ennui began to creep over the king. "My friend," Gilgamesh said, his voice low, "I sit here in Uruk, and I feel my strength seeping away. Men are born, they live, and they die. Their names are forgotten, blown away like dust. I cannot bear the thought of my name disappearing. I must do something great, something that will be remembered for all time. I must make a name for myself that will endure forever." Enkidu listened, his brow furrowed. "And what is this great deed you imagine, my brother?" Gilgamesh's eyes lit up with a dangerous fire. "Far away, in the mountains of the west, there is a forest, a cedar forest, so vast it is said to be 10,000 leagues in every direction. It is a sacred place, a place of the gods, and it has a guardian, a ferocious monster named Humbaba." He leaned forward, his voice a conspiratorial whisper. "His roar is the flood, his breath is fire, and his jaws are death itself. No one dares to enter his forest. We will go there, you and I. We will slay Humbaba, and we will cut down the tallest cedar tree in the forest and bring it back to Uruk. We will build a great gate for the city from its wood, a gate that will stand for centuries. Our names will be carved upon it. People will speak of Gilgamesh and Enkidu, the heroes who conquered the cedar forest, for all time. We will banish evil from the land and achieve immortality through fame." A chill went through Enkidu. He remembered the forest. When he was a wild man, he had roamed its edges. He knew its power, its sacred, ancient silence. He knew of Humbaba, who had been placed there as guardian by Enlil, the greatest of the gods. "No, my brother," Enkidu said, his voice heavy with dread. "This is a terrible idea. I have been to the edge of that forest. When Humbaba stirs, the very trees tremble for 100 leagues. His voice paralyzes all who hear it. This is not a monster to be trifled with. This is a sacred guardian. To attack him is to challenge the gods themselves. Let us not go." But Gilgamesh's heart was set. The fear in his friend's voice only made the adventure seem grander, the prize more glorious. "Why do you speak like a coward, my dear friend?" he said, clapping Enkidu on the shoulder. "You, whose strength is so great. Have you forgotten our power? Together, we are invincible. What is Humbaba to us? A mere shadow. I will go before you, and you can call out to me, 'Do not be afraid.' If I fall, at least my name will be remembered. But we will not fall. We will triumph." Enkidu saw the unquenchable fire in his friend's eyes and knew he could not dissuade him. And he knew with a sinking heart that he could not let Gilgamesh go alone. His fate was now tied to the king's. "If we must go," he sighed, "then let us be prepared." They went to the forges of Uruk, where the smiths worked day and night to craft weapons worthy of such a quest. They cast enormous axes, each weighing 3 talents of bronze. They forged great swords with hilts of gold and blades that sang when they sliced through the air. They prepared water skins and provisions and made ready for the long journey. But before they left, they went to the council of the elders of Uruk. Gilgamesh announced his plan, his voice booming with confidence. The elders listened, their faces etched with worry. "You are young, Gilgamesh," one of the oldest said, his voice like the rustling of dry leaves. "Your heart is full of fire, and it carries you away. We have heard of this Humbaba. He is not a mortal foe. His watch is set by the gods. Who are we to disturb such a place? Stay here in Uruk. Rule your city. Do not risk your life on such a fool's errand." But Gilgamesh would not be swayed. Seeing his determination, the elders relented, offering their blessing and their advice. "If you must go," they said, "do not rely on your own strength alone. Let Enkidu go before you. He knows the way, he has seen the path. He knows the secrets of the forest. Let him be your guide and your shield." Finally, they went to the great temple to see Gilgamesh's mother, the goddess Nensun. She was heartbroken at the news of their quest. She dressed in her finest robes, climbed to the roof of the temple and lit incense to the sun god, Shamash. "Oh, Shamash," she prayed, her voice filled with a mother's love and fear. "Why have you given my son such a restless, burning heart? Now he journeys on a dark path, to face a creature of great terror. I beg you, watch over him. When he is in the deep of the forest, send the great winds to aid him, the north wind, the south wind, the whirlwind, the storm wind. Let them blow in the face of Humbaba, so that the monster cannot turn, and my son can be victorious." Then she turned to Enkidu. She placed a sacred pendant around his neck. "Enkidu," she said, her eyes shining with tears, "though you are not of my womb, from this day forward you are my son. I entrust Gilgamesh to your care. Protect him. Bring him back to me safely." Enkidu bowed his head, accepting the charge. He felt the weight of the goddess's blessing and the weight of his promise. And so, with their great weapons on their shoulders and the blessings and fears of their city behind them, the two friends, Gilgamesh and Enkidu, walked out of the great gates of Uruk and set their faces toward the west, toward the unknown dangers of the cedar forest. The journey was long and arduous. For 6 days they walked, covering a distance that would take an ordinary man a month and a half. They crossed vast, sun-scorched plains and climbed range after range of rolling hills that grew into stony mountains. Each evening, as the sun began to set, they would stop. Gilgamesh would dig a well, finding fresh water deep in the earth. Enkidu would build a small shelter. Then Gilgamesh would prepare a mound of flour, a sacred offering, and he would turn his face to the mountain, praying for a dream from the gods. Sleep did not come easily to him. His great adventure was haunted by terrifying visions. On the first night, he dreamt that a mountain collapsed upon them, trapping their legs. But then a beautiful, bright figure appeared and pulled him out from under the mountain's weight. He woke with a start, his heart pounding. "Enkidu, my friend, did you call me?" "I had a terrible dream." He described the vision. Enkidu, who was wise in the interpretation of signs, listened carefully. "Do not be afraid, my brother," he said, his voice a calm reassurance in the darkness. "The mountain in your dream is not our enemy. It is Humbaba. The dream means that we will seize him and defeat him. The bright figure who saved you was the great god Shamash, our protector. The dream is a good omen." Gilgamesh's heart was eased, and they continued their journey. A few nights later, another dream came. Gilgamesh dreamt of a wild bull that charged him, its horns tearing up the earth. He was thrown to the ground, helpless, but then a figure offered him water and held his arm, giving him strength. Again, he woke in terror and called for Enkidu, who interpreted the dream in the same way. "The bull is not our enemy, my friend. The bull is Shamash, who will fight beside us. The one who offered you water is your own divine father, Lugalbanda. We are protected. The dream is a good omen." And so it went. With each day's journey, the landscape grew wilder, more imposing. The air grew cooler. They could smell the scent of pine and cedar on the wind, a fragrance that was both sweet and foreboding. And with each night's sleep, Gilgamesh was visited by a terrible dream, and each morning Enkidu would find a way to interpret it as a sign of their coming victory, calming the king's fears and steeling his resolve. Finally, after many long days, they stood at the edge of the great cedar forest. It was a place unlike any they had ever seen. The silence here was a living thing, deep and ancient. The trees rose up like pillars of a giant's temple, their tops so high they seemed to brush the clouds. The sunlight struggled to pierce the dense canopy, and the forest floor was a soft, dark carpet of fallen needles, where everything lay in a green-tinged twilight. The air was cool and thick, with the overwhelming, intoxicating scent of cedar. It was a place of profound beauty, but also of profound menace, a sacred, forbidden place. They stood before the great gate of the forest. Enkidu, who had been here before, reached out to push it open, but his hand froze. A wave of weakness washed over him. The memory of Humbaba's power, the sacredness of this place, filled him with a paralyzing dread. "My friend, I cannot," he whispered, his arm trembling. "My hand is numb. I have lost my strength." Gilgamesh looked at his friend, at this pillar of strength who was now overcome with fear. He felt a surge of compassion and resolve. "My brother," he said, his voice firm and kind, We have come so far. We have crossed mountains and plains. We have faced my own dark dreams. Shall we turn back now? Remember what we said in Uruk. 2 men together, a 3-ply rope, is not easily broken. You hold my hand, and I will hold yours. We will walk through this gate together. Forget your fear. Let my strength be yours. Heartened by the king's words, Enkidu took a deep breath. Together, they pushed open the massive gate, and its groan echoed through the silent woods. They stepped inside. They walked deeper into the forest, their great axes resting on their shoulders. They marveled at the height of the cedars, their trunks so thick it would take many men to encircle one. They found the track of Humbaba, a wide path where the monster walked. As they ventured further, they began to hear it. A low, rumbling sound, like distant thunder, that seemed to come from the earth itself. It was the sound of Humbaba, the guardian. Suddenly, a voice, vast and terrifying, boomed through the forest. Who has come here? Who has dared to trespass on my sacred woods and disturb my trees? It was Humbaba. The voice alone was enough to drain the blood from a man's face. Gilgamesh felt a tremor of fear run through him, but he remembered his purpose. He remembered the fame he sought. From a high ridge the monster appeared. He was a creature of nightmare. His face was a grotesque mask of a lion's. His teeth were like dragon's fangs. His roar was the sound of a flood, and his breath was a scorching fire. He was cloaked in 7 layers of terrifying radiance, 7 auras that shimmered around him like heat haze, each one a weapon of immense power. "Gilgamesh," the monster roared. "Why have you come here? I will tear the flesh from your bones and feed it to the vultures." The 2 friends stood their ground. "We have come for the great cedar," Gilgamesh shouted back, his voice surprisingly steady. "We have come to defeat you and bring your head back to Uruk." Humbaba let out a terrible laugh that shook the trees. He charged. But at that moment, Gilgamesh cried out to the heavens, "Shamash, help me now!" And the sun god heard his prayer. From the sky, the great winds that Ninsun had prayed for were unleashed. The north wind, the south wind, the whirlwind, the storm wind. 13 great winds blew at once, a furious gale that struck Humbaba full in the face. The monster was blinded by dust and debris. He could not move forward, he could not retreat. He was trapped in the vortex of the storm. The 7 layers of his radiance were scattered by the winds, leaving him vulnerable. "Now, Enkidu! Now!" Gilgamesh cried. They charged forward. Gilgamesh swung his massive axe, and Enkidu brandished his great sword. Humbaba, roaring in fury and pain, thrashed and fought, but he was pinned by the divine winds. The battle was fierce. The forest echoed with the clash of bronze on monstrous hide and the terrible bellows of the guardian. Finally, they brought the great creature to his knees. Humbaba, his power broken, looked at Gilgamesh, and his terrifying face changed. He pleaded for his life. "Spare me, Gilgamesh," he whimpered, the great voice now reduced to a pathetic whine. "Let me live, and I will be your servant. This whole forest will be yours. I will cut the cedars for you and build you a palace." Gilgamesh hesitated. For a moment he felt a pang of pity for the fallen guardian. He looked at Enkidu, but Enkidu's face was hard. "Do not listen to him, my brother," he warned. "Do not trust his words. A captured enemy, once released, will always seek revenge. If we let him go, we will never be able to find our way back to Uruk. Finish it now. Secure your fame." Gilgamesh knew his friend was right. With a heavy heart, he steeled himself. He lifted his axe one last time. Together, he and Enkidu struck the final blow. The great head of Humbaba rolled onto the forest floor, and a shudder ran through the ancient woods. A silence fell, deeper than any that had come before. They had done it. They had slain the unslayable. They had conquered the cedar forest. Exhausted but triumphant, they set to their task. They chose the tallest, most magnificent cedar in the forest, a tree so vast its top seemed to touch the sky. With their great axes, they felled it. The crash of its fall echoed like the end of an era. From its mighty trunk they fashioned a colossal gate, and on a raft made of its branches they prepared to float it, and the head of Humbaba down the river Euphrates, all the way back to Uruk. Their return was a glorious triumph. As they floated down the river, people from the towns and villages along the banks came out to cheer them. They arrived at Uruk as conquering heroes. They set up the magnificent cedar gate at the entrance to the city, a wonder for all to see. Gilgamesh had achieved his goal. He had performed a deed for the ages. His name, and the name of his beloved friend Enkidu, would never be forgotten. In the aftermath of their great victory, Gilgamesh washed the grime of the journey from his body. He combed his long, beautiful hair, put on his royal robes, and placed his crown upon his head. He was radiant, at the very peak of his power and glory. And his radiance caught the eye of a goddess. Ishtar, the goddess of love and war, the most beautiful and fearsome of all the goddesses, looked down from her temple and saw Gilgamesh in his splendor. Her heart was filled with desire. She came to him, her voice as sweet as honey. "Come, Gilgamesh," she purred. "Be my husband. I will give you a chariot of lapis lazuli and gold, with wheels of gold and horns of amber. You will be drawn by great storm demons as if they were horses. Enter our house under the fragrance of cedar. Kings and princes will bow down to you and kiss your feet. I will grant you riches beyond imagining." But Gilgamesh, filled with the pride of his recent victory, looked at the great goddess with scorn. He was not intimidated by her power, nor was he tempted by her promises. He remembered the stories of her mortal lovers and the terrible fates that had befallen them. "And what would I have to give you in return, great Ishtar?" he replied, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "You are a goddess. What do you need? And what happens to those who love you? You loved the shepherd, and you turned him into a wolf to be hunted by his own dogs. You loved the lion, and you dug 7 pits for him. You loved the horse, and you condemned him to the whip and spur. You loved the gardener of your father's temple, and you turned him into a blind mole. If I love you, will you not treat me the same way? You are a faulty door that lets in the wind, a shoe that bites its owner's foot. No, I will not be your husband." Ishtar was utterly humiliated. No one, mortal or god, had ever spoken to her with such contempt. She flew into a divine rage, her beautiful face contorted with fury. She ascended to the heavens and went before her father, Anu, the king of the gods, her eyes streaming with tears of anger. "Father!" she shrieked. "Gilgamesh has insulted me. He has listed all my past loves and thrown them in my face. I demand vengeance. You must give me the bull of heaven. I will send it down to Uruk to destroy him. It will gore Gilgamesh and trample his city." Anu was hesitant. "But if I give you the bull of heaven," he said, "it will cause 7 years of famine in the land. The people of Uruk will suffer." "I have prepared for that," Ishtar lied, stamping her foot. "I have stored enough grain for the people and fodder for the cattle. Give me the bull!" Reluctantly, Anu gave in to his furious daughter. He unleashed the bull of heaven. It descended from the sky like a falling star, a monstrous creature of celestial power. Where its feet touched the earth, great chasms opened up. With its first snort, 100 men of Uruk fell into a crack in the ground and were killed. With its second snort, 200 more perished. It was a plague, a force of cosmic destruction let loose upon the city. The people screamed and fled in terror. Gilgamesh and Enkidu heard the commotion and rushed out from the palace. They saw the great bull, its horns gleaming like the crescent moon, wreaking havoc in their city. Without a moment's hesitation, the two friends charged into battle once more. The fight was even more terrifying than the one with Humbaba. The Bull of Heaven was not a creature of earth, but of the sky. It was immensely powerful. It charged Enkidu, who, with his incredible strength and agility, managed to grab it by the horns and wrestle with it. "My brother!" Enkidu shouted to Gilgamesh as he struggled with the celestial beast. "It is too strong. I can hold it, but I cannot kill it. Circle around behind it. Between the nape of the neck and the horns there is a weak spot. Plunge your sword there." Gilgamesh, trusting his friend completely, did as he was told. He ran with the speed of a striking snake, and as Enkidu twisted the great bull's head, Gilgamesh drove his sword deep into the creature's neck. The Bull of Heaven shuddered, let out a final terrible bellow, and crashed to the ground, dead. They had done it again. They had defeated a divine scourge sent to destroy them. The city of Uruk erupted in cheers. The two friends were more than heroes. They were saviors. In their moment of triumph, they cut out the great heart of the bull and offered it as a sacrifice to the sun god, Shamash, who had protected them. But their arrogance had grown with their victories. As the goddess Ishtar stood on the high walls of Uruk, wailing and cursing them for killing her champion, Enkidu, in a fit of hubris, tore off the right thigh of the bull and threw it at her. "If I could get my hands on you," he shouted up at the goddess, "I would do the same to you." This was the final insult. This was the act of defiance that could not be forgiven. In the heavens, the great gods assembled in council. Anu, the sky father, was grave. Enlil, the god of earth and wind, was furious. "They have gone too far," Enlil thundered. "First, they killed Humbaba, the guardian I myself appointed to the sacred cedar forest. Now, they have killed the Bull of Heaven and insulted Ishtar to her face. This cannot be allowed. One of them must die." The sun god Shamash, who had protected the two friends, spoke in their defense. "But it was at my command that they killed the Bull of Heaven," he argued. "And Humbaba was a menace. Why should the innocent Enkidu die?" But Enlil's anger was greater. "You, Shamash, are to blame for this," he retorted. "You walked among them like one of their own and aided them. Therefore the decision stands. Gilgamesh is a king, and 2/3 divine. He cannot be touched. But Enkidu, the wild man, the one from the steppe, he must be the one to pay the price." And so the decree was made. The fate of Enkidu was sealed. That night, Enkidu had a terrible dream. He saw the gods in council passing judgment upon him. He woke up cold with sweat and told Gilgamesh. A shadow fell over the king's heart, a fear colder than any he had known in the cedar forest. Soon after, a strange sickness fell upon Enkidu. It was no ordinary illness. It was a wasting, a slow draining of the life from his body, sent by the gods. He lay on his mat in the palace, growing weaker with each passing day. In his delirium, he cried out in anger and despair. He cursed the great cedar gate they had brought back, for it had led to this. He cursed the trapper who had first found him. He cursed Shamhat, the temple priestess who had brought him to civilization. "Because of you," he moaned, "I left the wild, I lost my home with the animals, and now I must die in this city, in a bed, struck down by a divine curse." But then the god Shamash spoke to him from the heavens, his voice gentle. "Enkidu, why do you curse Shamhat? Was it not she who gave you fine food to eat and ale to drink? Was it not she who clothed you in beautiful garments? And was it not she who brought you to your truest friend, the great Gilgamesh, who will mourn you more than any other?" Enkidu's heart softened. He remembered the kindness he had been shown. He took back his curses and turned them into blessings. For 12 days, the sickness consumed him. Gilgamesh never left his side. He sat by his friend's mat, holding his hand, his heart breaking, as he watched the life fade from the strongest man he had ever known. He pleaded with the gods, he offered sacrifices, but nothing could change the divine decree. On the final day, Enkidu turned to Gilgamesh, his eyes clouded with pain. "My brother," he whispered, his voice a dry rasp. "Last night, I had another dream. I was in a dark place, the house of dust, the land of no return. The beings there were like birds, clothed in feathers. They ate dust and clay, and they lived in perpetual darkness. I saw the kings and priests of old, now mere servants in the underworld. And I saw the queen of the underworld, Ereshkigal, sitting on her throne. She looked at me, and her scribe wrote down my name. My time has come." With those words, a final shudder ran through Enkidu's body, and he grew still. Gilgamesh sat in stunned silence. He could not believe it. He touched his friend's chest, hoping to feel the beat of his heart. "Enkidu, speak to me. Brother, speak to me." But there was no answer. For 6 days and 7 nights, Gilgamesh refused to let them take his friend's body. He sat beside him, weeping, talking to him, hoping for a sign, a breath, a flicker of life. He covered his friend's face with a veil, like a bride. He paced the room like a lioness robbed of her cubs. He tore at his hair and his fine clothes, smearing himself with dust and ashes. He could not accept that this vibrant, powerful life force was gone forever. On the 7th day, as he watched over the body, he saw a tiny maggot crawl from his friend's nostril. And in that small, horrific moment, the finality of death crashed down upon him. This was not sleep. This was not a temporary absence. This was the end. Enkidu, his other half, his beloved friend, was gone and would soon be nothing but dust. And then, a new and terrible thought entered Gilgamesh's mind, a thought that would change the course of his life forever. "And I," he whispered to the silent room, his voice choked with terror, "will I too die? Will I too be laid out like my friend? Will this same darkness fall upon me?" The fear of his own death, his own mortality, seized him with a force far greater than Humbaba or the bull of heaven. His grief for his friend mingled with a primal terror for himself. The fame he had sought now seemed like a hollow trinket. What good was a famous name if the person who owned it was just a heap of dust in the dark earth? He would not accept it. There had to be a way. He had heard whispers, old legends, of a man who had escaped death, a man named Utnapishtim, who, after a great flood had washed over the world, had been granted eternal life by the gods. He lived far away, at the very ends of the earth, beyond the waters of death. A new quest formed in Gilgamesh's heart. Not a quest for fame, but for life itself. He would find this Utnapishtim. He would force from him the secret of immortality. He would not die. He would not let the darkness take him. He gave Enkidu a funeral worthy of the greatest hero. He commanded the artisans of Uruk to make a statue of his friend from gold and lapis lazuli. He made a great lamentation that echoed through the city. Then he turned his back on Uruk. He cast off his royal robes and dressed himself in the rough, uncured skins of a lion. He let his hair grow long and matted. He left his throne, his palace, his city, and he walked out into the wilderness, a wild man once more. But this time he was not a wild man of innocence, like Enkidu had been. He was a wild man of grief and terror, running not with the gazelles, but from the shadow of his own death. Gilgamesh wandered the vast, empty plains, his heart a hollow ache in his chest. The sun beat down on his unkempt hair, and the rough animal skins chafed his body, but he barely noticed. His physical discomfort was nothing compared to the turmoil in his soul. He wept for Enkidu, his brother, his other self. He would call his friend's name into the wind, and only the silence would answer. But beneath the grief was the cold, sharp spur of fear. "How can I rest?" he would cry out to the empty sky. "How can I be still when my own death is waiting for me? My friend whom I loved is now a handful of clay, and shall I not also lie down and never rise again?" This terror drove him onward, across deserts and wastelands, toward the rising sun. He was seeking the one man who could give him an answer. Utnapishtim, known as the Faraway, the only mortal to have been granted eternal life. The journey was said to be impossible, leading to the very edge of the world, but Gilgamesh's fear was greater than any obstacle. After weeks of wandering, he came to the great mountain pass of Mashu, whose twin peaks reached up to the vault of heaven and whose foundations reached down into the underworld. This pass was the gate through which the sun traveled each night. It was guarded by two terrifying creatures, a scorpion man and his mate. Their appearance was death itself. Their gaze could turn a man to stone. When they saw Gilgamesh approaching, his face etched with sorrow and his body clad in rough skins, they recognized the desperation in him. They also saw the divine blood that flowed in his veins. "Why have you come this far?" the scorpion man asked, his voice like the grinding of rocks. "Why have you undertaken this perilous journey?" "I have come because of my friend, Enkidu," Gilgamesh said, his voice raw with emotion. "I loved him dearly, and now he is dead. And I am afraid. I am afraid of death. I am seeking my ancestor, Utnapishtim, who stood in the assembly of the gods and was given eternal life. I must ask him the secret of how to conquer death." The scorpion man and his mate looked at each other. They saw the truth of the king's grief. "The way you seek is impossible, Gilgamesh," the scorpion man said, his voice softening almost imperceptibly. "No mortal has ever passed through the gate of the mountain. It is a tunnel of 12 leagues, of absolute, suffocating darkness. The sun travels this path at night. You will not survive. Even if I must walk in sorrow and pain, in heat and in cold, I will go," Gilgamesh insisted, his eyes burning with resolve. "Open the gate for me." Seeing his determination, they stood aside. "Go then, Gilgamesh. May you find what you seek." He entered the tunnel. The moment the great stone gate closed behind him, he was plunged into a blackness so complete it was like a solid thing. He could not see his own hand in front of his face. The air was thick and cold, and the silence was absolute, broken only by the sound of his own ragged breathing and the frantic beating of his heart. He walked. He put one foot in front of the other, his hands outstretched, touching nothing but the cold, dead air. After 1 league, the darkness was profound. After 2 leagues, it pressed in on him, and he felt a desperate urge to turn back. He thought of Enkidu, of the darkness of the underworld, and he forced himself onward. 3 leagues, 4 leagues. His mind began to play tricks on him. He heard whispers in the blackness. He felt unseen things brush against him. He was utterly alone, lost in a sea of night. He stumbled, fell, picked himself up, and kept walking. 7 leagues, 8 leagues. He was weeping now, calling out Enkidu's name, his voice swallowed by the oppressive dark. He was exhausted, his spirit nearly broken. He was walking through a metaphor for his own grief, a long, dark tunnel with no end in sight. After 9 leagues, he felt a faint stirring in the air. A breath of wind touched his face. Hope, a tiny, fragile thing, flickered in his heart. He quickened his pace. 10 leagues, 11 leagues. The wind grew stronger, and he could feel a change in the quality of the darkness. It was no longer absolute. A faint, pearlescent glimmer appeared far ahead. He ran towards it, his lungs burning, his legs screaming in protest. At the end of the 12th league, he burst out of the tunnel and into the light. He fell to his knees, blinking, gasping. He had emerged into a world of impossible beauty. He was in a garden, the garden of the gods. The trees here did not bear ordinary fruit. Their leaves were of lapis lazuli, and they were heavy with clusters of carnelian, rubies, and emeralds that glittered and chimed in the gentle breeze. The ground was scattered with pearls. It was a place of breathtaking, sterile beauty. But Gilgamesh had no eye for it. His heart was still a cold stone of grief. He had passed through the darkness, but the darkness was still inside him. He continued his journey, walking along the shore of a great sea. He came to a tavern by the water's edge, veiled in the morning mist. The tavern keeper was a woman named Siduri. When she saw the haggard, wild-looking man approaching, clad in animal skins, his face a mask of sorrow. She was frightened. She barred her door. Gilgamesh called out to her, "Tavern keeper, why do you bar your door? I am Gilgamesh, king of Uruk, who killed Humbaba and the bull of heaven." Siduri, hearing the desperation in his voice, spoke to him from behind the locked door. "If you are that great Gilgamesh, why are your cheeks so hollow, your face so drawn? Why is there such sorrow in your heart? And why do you look like one who has traveled a long and bitter road?" "How can my cheeks not be hollow?" he cried. "My friend, my brother Enkidu, whom I loved more than my own life, is dead. He has become clay, and I am afraid that I will die and become just like him. That is why I have come this far. I am searching for Utnapishtim. Tell me, which way must I go?" Siduri opened her door. She looked at him with eyes full of ancient, weary wisdom. "Oh, Gilgamesh," she said softly, "where are you wandering? The life that you seek, you will never find. When the gods created humanity, they allotted death to us, and they kept life for themselves. As for you, Gilgamesh, let your stomach be full. Be happy day and night. Make every day a festival of joy. Dance and play day and night. Let your clothes be clean, wash your head, and bathe in water. Look at the little one holding your hand, and let your wife be happy in your embrace, for this is the task of mankind." It was simple, profound advice. The wisdom of an ordinary life, lived well. But Gilgamesh could not hear it. His quest had consumed him. "No," he insisted, "I will not be turned aside. Tell me how to find Utnapishtim. Is there a way across this sea?" Siduri sighed. "The sea ahead is the waters of death, Gilgamesh. No one has ever crossed it. Only Shamash, the sun god, can make the journey. But there is one who might help you. Urshanabi, the ferryman of Utnapishtim, is in the woods nearby. He is with the stone ones, magical stone images that help him cross the waters safely. Go to him, perhaps he will let you cross with him. If not, then your journey ends here." Filled with a new, desperate energy, Gilgamesh stormed into the woods. He found Urshanabi, the ferryman, but in his blind rage and impatience, thinking the stone ones were guardians who would block his path, he took his axe and smashed them to pieces. He came before Urshanabi, brandishing his axe. The ferryman looked at the shattered remains of his magical companions. "Why have you done this?" Urshanabi asked, his voice filled with dismay. "You have destroyed the very things that would have allowed us to cross the waters of death. With your own hands, you have prevented your own journey." Gilgamesh's rage collapsed into despair. He had come so far, only to ruin his one chance at the last moment. He told Urshanabi his story, his grief for Enkidu, his fear of death. The ferryman took pity on him. "There is one way," he said. "Go back into the forest. You must cut down 120 poles, each 60 cubits long. Coat them with bitumen and bring them to me. You will have to use them to pull the boat across the waters of death. You must not let a single drop of that water touch your hands, for it is lethal." For weeks, Gilgamesh worked, felling the trees and preparing the poles. Finally, they were ready. They launched the boat and began the perilous journey. As they entered the waters of death, the air grew cold and a gray mist surrounded them. Urshanabi steered while Gilgamesh used the poles. Each time a pole touched the deadly water, he had to discard it and take a new one. One by one, the poles were used and cast away. When the last pole was gone, they were still not at the shore. Gilgamesh, in a final act of desperation, stripped off his animal skins and held them up to make a sail. Slowly, painfully, the boat drifted to the far shore. There, sitting on the beach, was an old man, watching them approach. He had the calm, distant look of one who has seen everything. It was Utnapishtim, the faraway. Gilgamesh stumbled ashore and collapsed before him. He told his story for the third time, the words pouring out of him in a torrent of grief and fear. "And so I have come to you, my ancestor, to ask you the secret. How did you find eternal life?" Utnapishtim looked at the weary, heartbroken king. His expression was not one of pity, but of a deep, unshakable realism. "There is no secret, Gilgamesh," he said, his voice quiet and steady. "Do we build a house to stand forever? Do we seal a contract to last for all time? Does the river rise in its flood and stay there forever? Life is fleeting. The gods decreed it. My story is unique. It will not be repeated." But Gilgamesh would not be satisfied. "But you are a man, just as I am," he insisted. "Yet you live forever. Tell me your story. Tell me how it happened." And so, as they sat on the shore at the end of the world, Utnapishtim told Gilgamesh the story of the great flood. "Long ago," he began, "the gods lived in the city of Shuruppak, but they grew tired of the noise of humanity. The clamor of the cities rose up and disturbed their sleep. And so the great gods, led by the furious Enlil, decided in their secret council to wipe mankind from the face of the earth with a great flood. But one of the gods, Ea, the god of wisdom, was clever. He did not agree with the plan, but he was sworn to secrecy. So he came to the reed hut where I lived, and he spoke not to me, but to the wall of the hut. 'Reed wall,' he whispered. 'Man of Shuruppak, tear down your house and build a boat. Abandon your possessions and save your life. Build a boat of specific dimensions and take aboard the seed of all living things.' I understood his meaning. I told the elders of my city that I had angered the god Enlil and had to leave, to go live with the god Ea in the waters. They helped me build the great boat. For 6 days and 7 nights I worked, gathering my family, the craftsmen of the city, and beasts of the field, both wild and tame. I loaded all my gold and silver. On the 7th day the storm began. A black cloud rose from the horizon. The gods of the storm, Adad and Nergal, unleashed their fury. The thunder cracked, and the lightning lit up a world that was being drowned. The rain fell in a solid sheet. The darkness was so complete that a brother could not see his brother. Even the gods themselves were terrified of the flood. They fled to the highest heaven of Anu, cowering like beaten dogs. Ishtar cried out like a woman in childbirth. "How could I have commanded such an evil thing? My people are being turned to clay." For 6 days and 7 nights the wind and the flood raged. On the 7th day the storm subsided. I opened a hatch and looked out. The world was silent. All was quiet. And all of humanity had been turned back into clay. I saw the flat, empty expanse of water, and I fell to my knees and wept. The boat came to rest on the peak of Mount Nimush. For 7 days we waited. On the 7th day I sent out a dove. It flew away, but found no place to land, and it returned. I sent out a swallow. It too returned. Then I sent out a raven. The raven flew away, and it saw that the waters had receded. It found food, it circled, it cawed, and it did not return. I knew then that it was safe. I opened the boat and released all the animals. I went ashore and made a sacrifice, an offering of sweet-smelling incense to the gods. The gods, starved for sacrifice, gathered around the smoke like flies. But then Enlil arrived. When he saw the boat and saw that some humans had survived, he was filled with rage. "Who has done this?" he roared. No human was meant to survive the destruction. But the wise god Ea stepped forward and rebuked him. "How could you be so senseless as to bring about the flood?" he said to Enlil. "Punish the sinner for his sin. Punish the transgressor for his transgression, but do not destroy all of humanity." It was I who warned him in a dream. "Kasser sin." Enlil's anger cooled. He came aboard the boat. He took my hand and the hand of my wife. He touched our foreheads and blessed us. "Hitherto Utnapishtim has been a man," he declared, but now he and his wife shall be as we gods are. They shall live forever, at the far-off place, at the mouth of the rivers. And that, Gilgamesh, Utnapishtim concluded, is how I came to be here. It was a unique event, a decision of the gods that will never happen again. So who will convene the council of the gods for you, so that you might find the eternal life you seek? Gilgamesh sat in silence, the weight of Utnapishtim's story crushing his last hopes. He had come all this way for nothing. Immortality was not a secret to be learned, but a singular gift he could never receive. Come now, Utnapishtim said, seeing the king's exhaustion. Let us test your claim to a life beyond the ordinary. You rail against death, but what is sleep but a little death? I challenge you. Try to stay awake for 6 days and 7 nights. It seemed a simple test, but Gilgamesh, worn out by his journey, his grief and his despair, had no sooner sat down than a mist of sleep washed over him. He slumped to the ground, fast asleep. Utnapishtim looked at him with a mixture of pity and irony. He said to his wife, "Look at this hero who wants to conquer death. He cannot even conquer sleep." His wife, more compassionate, said, "Wake him and let him return home in peace." "Mankind is deceptive," Utnapishtim replied. "He will deny that he slept. So let us make a record." Every day, for the 7 days that Gilgamesh slept, Utnapishtim's wife baked a loaf of bread and placed it beside his head. Each loaf was in a different state of decay. The first was hard and dry, the second was leathery, the third was soggy, the fourth was moldy, the fifth had gray spots, the sixth was stale, and the seventh, fresh from the oven, was still warm. On the 7th day, Utnapishtim touched Gilgamesh, and he awoke with a start. "I barely slept," Gilgamesh exclaimed. "A touch of drowsiness was all that overcame me." Utnapishtim simply pointed to the row of bread loaves. "Gilgamesh, count your loaves." Gilgamesh looked down and saw the evidence of his failure, a timeline of his own weakness laid out before him. He saw the mold and the decay, and he understood. He could not even defy sleep for a week. How could he ever hope to defy death for eternity? He had failed. A great cry of despair escaped his lips. "What shall I do, Utnapishtim? Where shall I go? The snatcher, death, has taken up residence in my very bedroom. Wherever I set my foot, there is death." He had finally and completely accepted his mortality. The quest was over. Utnapishtim told Urshanabi, the ferryman, to take Gilgamesh to the washing place, to clean his filthy, matted hair, and to give him new, clean robes to wear, so he could return to his city in dignity. As Gilgamesh was about to board the boat for his journey home, Utnapishtim's wife whispered to her husband, "He came here on a long and weary journey. Will you not give him something to take back with him?" Utnapishtim called out to the king, "Gilgamesh, I will tell you a hidden thing, a secret of the gods. At the bottom of the sea there is a plant. It has thorns like a rose, and it will prick your hands. But if you can obtain this plant, it will restore your lost youth. It will not give you eternal life, but it will make you young again." A last flicker of hope ignited in Gilgamesh's heart. This was not immortality, but it was a second chance. He tied heavy stones to his feet, opened a channel in the sea floor, and plunged into the deep. He found the plant, and though its thorns tore at his hands, he grasped it firmly and brought it to the surface. "Urshanabi," he said, his voice filled with a quiet excitement, "this is the plant of rejuvenation. I will take it back to Uruk. I will give it to the old men of the city to eat, and they will become young again. And then I will eat it myself, and I will return to the days of my youth and strength." He and Urshanabi began the long journey home. The mood was different now. The desperate, frantic energy was gone, replaced by a quiet sense of purpose. One hot afternoon, they stopped beside a cool, inviting pool of water. Gilgamesh, wanting to refresh himself, set the precious plant on the bank and waded into the pool. As he was bathing, a serpent, drawn by the sweet fragrance of the plant, slithered out from the reeds. It seized the plant and ate it. Immediately, the serpent shed its old skin, leaving it on the ground, and disappeared into the water, renewed and young. Gilgamesh came out of the water and saw what had happened. The plant was gone. The serpent's sloughed-off skin lay on the ground, a mocking testament to his loss. He sat down on the ground, and for the first time since Enkidu's death, he wept, not in rage or terror, but in simple, profound sadness. He wept for his loss, for his foolishness, for his long and fruitless journey. He had endured everything, and for what? He had found nothing for himself. He had only succeeded in giving the secret of rejuvenation to a snake. It was over. All of it. He turned to Urshanabi, his face streaked with tears. "It is finished," he said, his voice empty. "Let us go home." They continued their journey in silence. The fire of the quest had been completely extinguished, and in its place was a vast, weary calm. Finally, after many days, they came within sight of Uruk. From a hill, Gilgamesh looked down upon his city. He saw the great walls he had built, shining in the afternoon sun. He saw the date palm orchards, the temples, the bustling houses. It was just as he had left it, and yet he saw it now with entirely new eyes. He turned to Urshanabi, the ferryman, and his voice was no longer filled with grief or ambition, but with a quiet, steady pride. "Urshanabi," he said, pointing, "look! Look at the walls of Uruk. Go, walk along the ramparts, inspect the foundation platform. See how its bricks are baked. Are they not of the finest kiln-fired brick? 1/3 of the city is houses, 1/3 is gardens, and 1/3 is the precinct of the temple of Ishtar. This is Uruk. This is what endures." In that moment, Gilgamesh understood. His quest for personal, physical immortality had been a fool's errand, a flight from the truth of what it means to be human. True immortality was not to be found in a magical plant or a divine gift. It was here, in the work of his hands. It was in the city he had built, a place that would shelter and nurture generations of people long after he was gone. It was in the community of his people. It was in the story he had created, a story that would be told and retold, a story of friendship, of loss, and of acceptance. His great journey had not brought him eternal life, but it had brought him wisdom. It had brought him peace. He had left Uruk as a tyrant, a wild bull, and returned as a true king. He ruled his city with justice and compassion for the rest of his days, at peace with his mortal fate. He knew that one day he would lie down and not rise again, just like his beloved Enkidu. But he also knew that the great walls of Uruk would stand, a testament to his life, and that his story would be etched in clay, to be read by the light of 1,000,000 moons to come. And so, his story has endured. The story of Gilgamesh, the king who learned that the greatest victory is not over death, but over the fear of it, and that the truest life is the one we build for others. Now, the tale is told. The clay tablet is written. Close your eyes. Let the walls of Uruk fade into the mists of time, and let the quiet wisdom of its king settle in your heart. Sleep now. Sleep deep, for every day is a life, and every night is a chance to dream. And that, in the end, is enough.